Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video I'll be modeling the Apple Magic Mouse for the second time, but with considerable more accuracy. And we'll also be following the proportions of the original mouse much more closely. Just to give you an idea of how I've gone about this, I've used this command here, this one, surface from network of curves. That is under, if you cascade the surfacing tools, it's the third one, right? So if you don't have my toolbar group, that's where it is. Right, so the way that works, I think if I illustrate that from the start, then you'll have a better idea of what I'm doing as I proceed. So I'm going to go to the top view and I'm going to draw a rectangle. Any old rectangle, doesn't affect anything, and I will explode it and I will rebuild that curve with, let's say, 5 and 3. Okay, so going back to the perspective view, I'm going to switch on all of the points just so that you can see how I manipulate this. I'm simply creating an arbitrary shape because what I want to show you is the sides can be anything you want. What this command requires, let's just switch that off. It requires two curves in one direction, in other words going top to bottom, if you will, or in the Y direction, and then another two curves going in the X direction, but they don't have to be exactly straight or anything like that. They can be curved, and in addition you can put other curves in between as guide curves. So let's see if this will work. If I go to the midpoint and find the other one, I don't know if this is going to work. There it is. Okay, that'll do it. Let's go back to this view. Okay, so I've got a network of curves. You can see this one's all skew. Let's see if we can move that around. Something like that, and then, all right, for this exercise, it doesn't matter. So if I use the command, I can just select all of the curves. Sometimes it'll ask me, if you want to change the order. And this is the result I get. I'll go through the results a bit later. The other thing that I will be showing you is that because I've got the record history button on, I can use these other curves, or any of the curves, in fact, to influence the shape. So all right, so I think you get the idea. So that's the basis of the procedure, is just to create 4 curves plus 1 or 2 in the interior. And then the bottom, I'll show you a bit later, is also a new process. Okay, so let's get to it. Let me just show you the images. I suppose let me first show you, those are the curves that we have. Let me switch off my previous model. Right, so these are curves which I've borrowed from my prior model. If you don't know how to make them, you'll need to watch my previous video. I'm going to go to the images, go to the front view, and just show you that I've got the original mouse in here, and I want to just move these 2 curves. Only 2 I need. I just need to move those down a little bit so that they line up with the original model. Right, so let's go back to this view here. There's the base. That'll be the midline, in other words, the sharp line that divides the top surface from the lower surfaces. And then that'll be obviously the limits of this upper surface. So what I want to do now is I want to chop this, or split this curve into 3 parts. So I'm going to switch the images off for now because we don't need them and they get in the way. And go to the top view, and then I will draw, to see if I can adjust this a little bit. Not quite happy with that shape. There we go, something like that. Okay, so now we'll draw just a straight line using the line tool. I'm going to hold the shift button down because we're going to use that line to split this line, as I've said before. So going back to the perspective view, I'm going to extrude this line into a plane, and then I want to mirror that plane around an axis. So what I've done prior to this is I've actually created lines. I can't select them now, I've locked them. Those are lines which echo the x-axis and the y-axis, and then my point needs to be locked as well. So I've locked it. Okay, so I'm going to use that line there to mirror with. So I'll say mirror. I'm going to select this item here. I'm going to say enter or right click. I'm going to select the midpoint and the other midpoint. And so now I've got these two mirrored. So I'm going to use those two planes to split this this curve. So go to the split command, or the trim split command. There we go, split. Select the item you want splitted, and then it'll say, once you've said enter, select the cutting object. So you select 1, 2, hit enter, and now you should have 1, 2, 3, 4 curves. So I'm going to delete one of these, and then I'm going to get the other one out the way because it's still going to be useful. Right, so we are going to get this error message. I'm going to switch this off for now. Hopefully that won't give us the error message. Because I'm keeping the record history button on so that I can show you changes later on. The next thing I want to do is I want to create some guide curves. So I'm going to move this one over a little bit, just a tad. Let's go to the top view just to see what that looks like. Yeah, that looks good. All right, so back to perspective view, and I'm going to drag it up. And now let me just see if I can remember how I wanted to do this. Yeah, this should be good enough. So I only need one side because I will be able to mirror what I create onto the other side. So I want to create an intersection between that curve and this plane. And the way to do that is to go to the curve from objects cascade, and this button here, object intersection. If I click on it, I'll get 2 points appearing. Oh, I didn't select this other line. Let's do that again. Right, so there I have 2 points. I'm going to get that out of the way again, and I want to lock these. So I'm going to use the lock command. So now they can't move, and I can get a curve which goes from that point to that point. Because unlike in Solidworks, you don't have reference points, you have to create them. So I'm going to create a plane which references, sorry, not a construction plane which references this this flat plane. I'm going to go to this command here, which is set C plane to object. So I've got just 3 plane commands in here. This is the set C plane world top. That's like the reset button. That will select the object, and then this one here is going perpendicular to curve. So if I select this, you'll see the construction plane lines up with this plane here. Very, very convenient. The other thing I want to do is I want to project. If I click on the project button, that locks everything to the construction plane. So that if I draw a line, if I click on a point, I can't really go, I can try and go out. It looks like I went out, but I didn't. I actually stayed within the bounds of that plane. Okay, so let's select this arc start and end point. And because I've got those points selected, I can now select the points and not worry about not getting the curve to line up. And then drag it to about there. Let's go to the front view to see what we're doing. All right, so you don't want it to be too high, so you want it to go about 1/3 of the way, and we want to rebuild that to be 7 and 3. So it's 7 points at degree 3. That's because this curve here is also 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we want this line to echo what happens with that line. Now I can adjust this a little bit just to make it sort of echo the upper curve a little bit. Something like that. Right, don't worry about getting it perfect for now. That's good enough. Let's go back to this one here. And I want to get the plane back to where it should be. But before I do that, I'm going to unlock the projection plane and then click on this reset. That's that one there. It'll go back to where I want it to be. So that can come out the way for the time being. And now I can mirror this one as well. So let's go to the mirror command, which is over here. Mirror from that point to that point. And so now that line should be touching here as well. So I want to get one more thing going. I want to get this line to touch the curved line either side. I don't need to do that because in fact you can still create a compound surface with the lines not touching, but it won't create as smooth a surface. So I want to get that point onto the middle of this point. So I'm going to move this plane, which is becoming very useful. I want to move it to the 0 point. So I'm going to say move. I'm going to get my snaps to find the midpoint at the bottom and then type 0 in, and enter. And there we go. We've got this lined up perfectly in the middle. And I know I created this curve perfectly around, all the curves around the center point. So I know that I'm confident that I'm going to get a point which matches those. There, pick the two lines and the plane, come across here and say object intersection. And there they are. And then you lock them. So lock them so that they can't go out of whack. Right, then with that in place, let's just put the project button on again. Well, we don't need to actually, because we're only going to play with the end of this curve. So what you do is when the gumball goes black with all three axes, that means you can move it in any direction. So you can see I move it left to right or up or down. And I want to move it to that point. There we go. And then let's do the same on the other side. Wait till it goes black. Move it to that point. Project button on, so we don't need to switch it off. I've got a few too many points here, but I'll leave them for now. Okay, so now we can proceed. We've got three curves in the interior, 2 outer curves, and then 2 curves on the ends. So if I go to this command, what it's really looking for, I won't click on it yet. It's looking for kind of a sequence from there to there, and then across like this. But if you select the curves and you've created them properly, it'll put that sequence in for you. If you create something confusing, it'll ask you which ones you want to start first with and then which one second. So this one should just work straight away. There we go. And you can see I've created these side curves a little bit high, so they've created a bit of a dip. But don't worry about that. I need to explain, or would like to explain, the options button. The edge curves tolerances just change the tolerances. So at the moment, the curve meets, or the surface meets the curve almost exactly. I can increase the tolerance by, or decrease the tolerance, but increase the accuracy by doing something like that, 0.01, 0.01. That'll get me a much more accurate surface, but it'll also give me more isocurves. So one is probably optimum, but let me just show you what happens when I decrease the accuracy by increasing the actual tolerance. You'll see that the surface now extends beyond the curve and dips in and out, and it's really not what you want. So I think for this exercise, 1 is good enough, and then leave it at position. We don't want to loose it. Loose will do the same thing. It'll actually get the surface to extend beyond the curve. So say okay. Right, here's where the magic bit happens. Well, it's all magic, but I'm going to select those 2 curves, and I'm going to just show their control points. And now what I can do is I can select in pairs as always these, and I can adjust them up and down and left to right to get the surface to behave as I want it to. So something like that, and then I can use the scaling button to just scale this outwards, All right, and down a bit. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to create a much smoother surface, but it must be wider at the front and narrower at the back. You don't have to do this. You'll actually get a very nice surface with just 5 curves, the 4 outer ones and the middle one. You'll actually get a very good surface. I'm just showing you this as one of the benefits of following this method. Okay, so let's adjust those a little bit and down a bit. And you need to get your view sort of tangent to the curve of the surface just to see what's happening. So you can see it's kind of dipping in there. That means these 4. Let's unselect these other ones. And let those 2 and just drag them down a bit. That was a bit far. And then maybe these outwards of a little bit. Right, so that's, I'm not going to fuss too much. I can see I need to do one more adjustment. Downwards, perhaps. That's good enough. So what you can see here, if I rotate around here, now let's just get that a little bit better. That's good enough. Right, so as I rotate this surface, you'll see the horizon line will alter slightly. So it's going to get flatter as we go to the front, as you can see. All right, so that's good enough for now. That's just to show you the method. That's because record history is on. So now to the base. Let's hide this. So I'm going to say Control H to hide it, and we can delete that one. For the base, before I do that, let's just switch those control points off. For the base, I'm going to create, using my base curve, I'm going to create this surface from planar curves. All right, and then what we need here is we need 2 lines which cross from the center on this base curve, so transverse and longitudinally, and a corresponding 2 lines on this surface doing the same thing. Okay, so to do that, click on the surface. So let's just hide that curve, put it onto change object layer, switch those curves off. Right, so let's put those 2 as well onto that layer so they're out of the way, and click on this object and then go to this command here, which is extract isocurve, which in this set of commands, I think, I'm not going to find it right now. Right, I'll do that later. So extract isocurve, and then you click on the surface and you'll see that you'll get a line which traces the isocurves. So we want this to snap to the midpoint, but I've already got this point in place. So click to that one. And now I want one to go across the thing, transverse. So I'm going to hit the T button, I think it is, for toggle, T for toggle, T and enter. And there we go. I've got this one here, and I can get it to go approximately right. So this one's not really going to work until I get these bottom ones in place. So let's do the same with the bottom one. So I'm going to go to the middle and T, and we can actually select that point. Right. And in fact, I think a better way of doing the transverse line here is to draw a line. So I'm going to hit the B button so we go both, so that we get a line which cuts across like that. Let's do that again. B, and I need to select the midpoint. Right, and then I'm going to project that line using this project curves to that surface. There we go. Right, then I'm going to delete this one. Hopefully it won't get rid of that one. No, it won't. All right, so now I've got sort of an anchor points from which I can create curves between that line and that line and that line and that line. All right, but what I also need or would like is some sort of guide curve to help me with that line. So I want a line which is going to be tangent to this line. And the way to do that is to go to this command here, this cascade lines, and pick this one which says line normal to surface with a little sphere on it, and then select the line that you want it to be normal to, tangent to, and the end point. And now when you drag a line out, it's guaranteed to be tangent to that point. Right? So do that again on this side. And we need one more, which will be on this line at the end. Right, so these are just guidelines. We might change them. I think what would be good now is to have a look in the images and go to the front view and see if those lines kind of line up with the angle that we want. So in this case, this doesn't really line up, nor does that one. I suppose my model doesn't line up with my curves as well as I'd like to, but I'm not going to get too fussed about that. I just want to alter this angle. There are a number of ways of doing this. One is to go to the rotate 2D button and click on the end, and then go to this other end, and then just drag this out to where you think it should be. So that's one way. Let's show you another way. We can use the gumball. There are a number of ways to relocate the gumball. I've got mine set up as an alias, which I type in G and enter. But the other way you can do it is let the two arms go black when you hover over them. Hold the control button down and then just drag this. It seems to be constrained. I'm not sure why. Oh, okay, I know why. That's because only one of these lit up. So let's do that again. Hold the control button down. You should be able to drag it and let it click to the end point. And then you can use the rotate bar, the rotate thing, just to rotate it around something around there. Fantastic. Okay, let's go to what do we want? The right view. See if we can get the same thing. So what I want on this one is I don't want that line to sort of interfere with the outside of this curve. So I do need it to rotate a little bit. So I'm going to use my alias, which is G, enter, go like that. And then I'll just get this to rotate a little bit. There we go. Right, so those are in place. Let's go back to perspective view. And what's next? I need to figure this out. Okay, so I'm going to use this adjustable curve blend to create a curve blend between that line. And here you need to be careful. So I'm going to backtrack a bit. If you click on this adjustable curve blend command, make sure you do not select on the opposite end that you want. So make sure you click on the end of the line closest to where you want it to be. And now I want to go to my front view just to see what's happening. And I'm going to switch the images off just so that it's easier. And now I can control what happens with those curves. So I can select things like position, which give me a straight line, or tangency, which will do that. But we want curvature, and we want to dial this line back something like that to make sure that the bottom of this line is slightly above this straight line. So let's drag this one up a bit as well. Right, so the closer these 2 points get together, I'm holding the Alt button just to stop it snapping. The closer these two get together, the sharper it is at that point, which is what I want. And the same on this side. So I want to drag this in a little bit, and that one in a fair bit, something like that. Can drag this out a little bit more. Yeah, I think that's good. If it isn't, it's okay. All right, so make sure that the trim button is on. We don't want to join anything, so leave the join button off and say, okay. Let's do the same on this side. So I'm going to right click to get the command to come back. Give me that curve. And here, I'm not sure if I'm going to get the right curve. Let's see what happens. All right, so just need to check in the perspective view. Yes, I've got it right. Go back to front view. drag this one up, leave that one as it is, drag this one back a bit. Right, I think this could be slightly shallower. No, let's leave it like that, because I definitely don't want that curve to dip below this curve here. So that's what you're aiming for. Right, so one more. Let's go to the right view. And we want to do the same thing with, so adjustable curve blend with this curve to that line. Make sure that it's doing the right thing. Yes, it is. So we're going to go back to the right view. And that pretty much looks okay. I mean, you can adjust it if you want. You can make it steeper or shallower as you feel fit and say okay. And the reason I'm only doing one is because I don't want to do the other side, because I might not copy the same values. So I'm simply going to mirror using my midpoint and tapping like that. There we go. So now we're ready to create the third and last surface. And I will use for that this command here, sweep 2 rails. So there's sweep 1 rail, in which you have a single rail and as many profiles as you want. And the sweep 2 rails, which requires 2 rails. So before I start this, in fact, let me start it. I'll show you what the little problem is. Because I created this surface from 4 lines on the outside, this surface has 4 edges instead of 1 continuous edge. So there's 1, 2. Now that counts as 2 rails already. So you can see the command is asking me for shapes now. So we need to get another edge, an edge which echoes what the surface does. To do that, we go to this command here, duplicate edge. I'm just trying to figure out where that is on your, it's under curve from objects. If you cascade it, it should be the third one, duplicate edge, okay? So click on the 4 edges, 1, 2, 3, and the 4th one, and then enter or right click. And then you'll have a curve, and before you do anything else, join it so that it becomes one curve. So I have one curve there, which I'm going to use as the top rail, and then I already have an edge on the bottom one. So sweep 2 rails, this curve. You'll see it gives you the option of a surface edge or a curve. I want the curve in this case, and then that edge. Right, so now you'll see it says select sweep shapes, because previously it was just the curves or the rails. And then select these in sequence. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then say OK. And yours should do the same as mine. It won't close the sweep. So to close the sweep, in the options button, you say close sweep. Yours might have things like position or tangency selected. Those in this case are not going to affect the surface too much, but make sure it's on curvature. And if these become wobbly, these lines here, you can add a slash, but we're not going to do that. If yours is looking good enough, leave it as it is, just to simplify the process. So say OK. And voila, we have a very, very, very nice surface. This might have a little bit of a bulge in it, so maybe it needed a slash or 2 in that process, or maybe one of these curves needed to be adjusted. It might be possible. I think it might be possible. Let me just see. To adjust that. So let's just switch these on so that they don't go away. It is. Look at that. Okay, so with the history on, I can actually adjust it. And I'm not sure if it'll do it both sides. You might have to do, let's see, Control Z. Right, it does it both sides. So because I copied that line, I only have to adjust one side, and both sides will update. So, fantastic. Okay, the last thing we need to do is just to make sure that this is a watertight object, because remember in the last video, we had to trim these items so that we can get a watertight item. What we've created here, just to show you, is an untrimmed surface. So if I switch the control points on, you'll see that those control points echo the edge of the line. So you can't trim this. It's an untrimmed surface. It means you can trim it. You can add another curve in and trim it. But at the moment it's untrimmed, which means you can't like trim anything off the edges. If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Right. So select your 3 surfaces, and if you've done this right, they should join. So that's a line, that's a line, that's a surface. A quicker way to do that is just to right click, drag up. Doesn't matter if you've selected lines, join it. Watch what happens. It says, I've got one complete object here. I can see it selected 3 surfaces. And the way to check that is to go to your analysis toolbar and say show edges. And there are no pink edges. That's brilliant. So this is a completely closed item. If you've got this far, absolutely brilliant. This is as much as you need to do, because we're going to take this object now into SolidWorks and we're going to engineer it further in SolidWorks. But we will be playing around with these commands here in a session before we do that. So the sub D, just to show you what the capabilities are, that's a great deal of fun. Thanks very much for watching, and good luck.